at a later time. So anyway, everybody is now here, or some people are now here anyway, and we've just started our nice little live stream here with James Horgan. So just for the viewers at home, just to give a little bit of information about who James Horgan is and how I came to know him. So back when we were about 14, 15, so many moons ago, it's difficult to say now, but 20 years ago when we were
crazy.
40, because you must be what, 35 now? 36?
Yeah, 35. Yeah, bob on. So yeah,
34, yeah. And we actually met 20 years ago when I was 14 and you were 15. Yeah. And we were part of what was called then SATCO, which was a system whereby virtual pilots could be put in contact with virtual air traffic controllers via various pieces of software. And it was back in the day of dial-up internet connections. I still had my 56K dial-up modem at the time on my Windows 95 computer. And we came into contact through there. And then we stayed in contact over the years. And James then, I went off to university to do my language studies. And James went through pilot training and up until the start of COVID and recently was a captain for a UK holiday airline. So maybe we could start out, James, by you just telling the people who are watching how you got to the current position in flying that you have now.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. As Jim says, I've known him for a number of years, and my journey into aviation was built from what started as an enthusiast type of thing, because when I was young, I couldn't afford to fly. And then I went to university, but I did aviation technology at university, up in the University of Leeds. I didn't get on so well at university, so I left that before I graduated. But as part of that, when I finished at university, when I was looking for other jobs, I took a job as cabin crew because I knew I wanted to fly. I'd done a few flying lessons in the interim. So while I was cabin crew, I thought, why not? I'll get a bit of experience. So I worked for TUI. Well, it was Britannia back then, which became Thomson Fly. So I did a year for them. And then after that, I did a year for My Travel, which was Thomas.
Which then became Air. Well, no, it was what Air Tours used to be. I think
Air Tours then became My Travel, and then JMC, I think, was somewhere in the gap there, and then they became Thomas Cook, which obviously unfortunately went bust about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. And so I did my PPL in between that. So I would go out and work as cabin crew for a full summer season, and then I would over the winter I went out to the States to do my PPR to Florida. And then I came to a decision when I was making a decision about whether I was going to go back for another season as cabin crew. They couldn't accommodate some of my ground school dates for my ATPLs. So I thought, right, this is the time. It's obviously a sign. I managed, with the help of family, to get some money together and do my commercial training. So I did my CPL, IR, ME, MCC. And then after I did that, I was very lucky that I got a job with Ryanair quite quickly. So I spent 5 years at Ryanair, being based at Stansted on the 737-800. And then after that, I decided that from when I'd been living in Leeds, I like living up north. I wanted to go back up north. So I found my current employer, and I've been flying with them now for about 8 years. So I was a first officer at Ryanair for 5 years. And then I did my upgrade while I was up in Leeds in my current company.
Come back to the question of Ryanair again, because I mean, a lot of people slate Ryanair for various reasons. Would you say that Ryanair is a good stepping stone for a young pilot who's just come out of flight school?
Definitely. I mean, I flew for Ryanair, so we're talking 13 years ago. So the employment procedures and policies change a little bit. But Ryanair is one of these airlines it does exactly what it says on the tin. You will fly. They're modern aircraft. It's it's one of the safest airlines in the world when you look at the amount of flights they have. The operation was very, very well managed. Yes, it's time critical with the short turnarounds. You do long days. But ultimately, when I was based in Stansted, I was flying to nearly 100 destinations. It was very good for building experience and building hours quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're a young guy or girl and you want to go out and see the world a little bit, obviously you move to France and you can do that. They have bases all over Europe, so you can be sent wherever they send you, really.
Yeah, and then some bases are nicer than others, from what I've understood. But
some of them, yeah, it depends on your outlook, really. I mean, I wanted it based in the UK for medical reasons, but then there are bases in France, Italy. Well, France is a bit contentious, but Italy would have been nice. It is ever expanding. I mean, they've got bases in the Azores now, in Morocco, Scandinavia.
Yeah, they've got a base in Marrakesh, from what I can remember. Yeah.
Yeah, the policy at Ryanair was very much you needed to fill a hole that they might have, but otherwise, yeah.
And would you recommend young pilots go down the integrated route or the modular route as you did?
Well, I mean, it's 6 and 2 3s, if you will. It really depends on your situation at the time. If you can commit to going full time and you have the support of your bank, basically your bank balance, then it is a very viable option to getting into flying, because a lot of flying schools have agreements with companies at the moment. I mean, I'm talking more pre-COVID. Now everything's up in the air, if you'll excuse the pun. But beforehand, yeah, you had big airlines like EasyJet, BA. They have certain schools that they would prefer to work with. So if you wanted to work for them, you were in a slightly better position. But at the end of the day, when it comes to needing pilots, the policies do change. I liked modular because it meant I had more flexibility about where I could train, when I could train, and there was a significant cost difference between integrated training and modular training.
Okay, well, let's move on a little bit. And obviously, alongside your flying activities, you have various other activities that you like to get up to, some of which we can discuss on the internet, others we can't. But one of the things that you've been involved with for a very long time is the organisation World Flight. So maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about what World Flight is and how you came to be involved in it.
So way back when, as we were saying about when we were involved with Satco, which became VATSIM, if people who are watching are familiar with that, I knew you and I knew a number of other people. I knew a guy called Gary Oliver, who, as we went off and did our own things. You went to university, I went to my pilot training. He went to university as well, or he went to study, and he's now working in computing. And as I got a bit older, we sort of got back into contact because he had built himself a full flight simulator based on the 747-400, and he very kindly invited me to go and fly it. I did that, and then from then on, I became a more regular part of the team. Now, World Flight as an organization is basically a group of people or groups of teams who have flight simulators in some capacity. It's not just desktop flying. They either have some sort of Heath Robinson style setup at home, or they'll have anything up to the full flight, full motion things. And it was started in Australia. And I think it's been going for 20 years as well. So it started about the sort of time when we got involved in Satco, and there must be 10, 15 teams now, and they do it to raise money for charity. So each team picks a charity, and then as the event goes on, it's Sydney to Sydney, round the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's normally about 50 legs, and we raise money for our chosen charity. So this year we raised nearly £40,000, which was good.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. And how long would it typically take to build from scratch a simulator like that?
It depends what sort of setup you want, really. I mean, I'm building my own simulator, and I'm lucky that I managed to get hold of a lot of OEM stuff, original equipment manufacturer, that stands for. So real Airbus components. Mine's based on the A330, but it's very much like restoring an old car. It's a labor of love. It depends how in depth you want to go into it, how much money you've got as well. You could start with something very simple, which would be a small keypad on your desk that would replicate the FMC, maybe an autopilot controller, and you can just build on it and build on it. Some people want to have something that they can fly and add to, and they don't have any downtime. But then some people want something that, if you're building a big full enclosed shell, obviously it's going to take a lot longer, and you wouldn't expect to be able to fly it at the same time.
Yeah, so it's a labour of love. I suppose it's like building a massive train set at the end of the day, isn't it? You've got to.
Yeah, I liken it to restoring a classic car, you know, and that probably gives you an idea of the cost as well. You pick whichever car you like, and the cost becomes, well, do you want to just replace the wing, which would be expensive, or do you want to try and repair the wing? You know, it's again, it depends really how much free time you've got and how much spare cash you've got as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So your simulator, I think you said, is going to be an A320 simulator?
A330 mine is.
An A330 simulator.
Yeah. So when I was saying before about being cabin crew, I worked for My Travel, and the first long haul flight I did was on the A330, which they were operating at the time. So I picked that aircraft because I like the A330 is an excellent aircraft because you can do long haul, wide body routes, longer stuff, but also you do the high density short haul stuff on it. So we used to do Vegas one day, and then we'd go down to Palma de Mallorca the next day. So I found it was a nice aircraft to pick because it gave me the flexibility. If I wanted to fly somewhere in the sim, then realistically I could fly anywhere I wanted. It has.
Well, there was. I always remember. This is the geek in me talking. You probably remember the ITVV series of videos about where they filmed whole flights. And in fact, one of my favourite ones was the one with the A330 from Air Tours. With the captain was a guy called Julian Bond.
Yes, I remember it very well. I still have a copy of it.
Yeah. Did you ever fly with Julian Bond when you were crew?
When I was cabin crew at My Travel, I don't really remember the flight deck very well because I was a very, very junior member of cabin crew, so we didn't get too involved with the flight deck. But that aircraft, MLJL, is the first one that I flew on, and that's the one that my simulator is based on. And they've been scrapping. Unfortunately, obviously, Thomas Cook went bust about 2 years ago, and it's now got to the point where they've picked over the carcasses of the aircraft, and they're being scrapped now. And I'm very lucky to have secured quite a lot of material from those airplanes. So
from the original MLJL.
Yeah, so it's kind of gone full circle. I've managed to get seats and cabin signs and bits and bobs. So as well as my cockpit that I'm building, I'm going to have a passenger cabin behind. So people will be able to come and sit and have a drink while they're waiting for their turn to fly the airplane.
Oh, fantastic. That's pretty amazing. So let's move on a little bit to COVID and just describe, just to sort of recap the current situation. So obviously the UK at the moment is currently supposedly in full lockdown, meaning that travel is very severely restricted, particularly foreign travel. And the airline industry, particularly the holiday airline industry, which is the area that you're working in. Your company, I don't think, does a lot of commuter routes, does it? I think it's more holiday.
It's not particularly business focused. No, it's mostly leisure travel.
Which means, I guess that your current company is almost completely at a standstill at the moment.
It's like someone's taken the TV remote and gone pause. Very much so. Our airplanes are still operating, but in just for recency, for training purposes, the longer you park an airplane, the more tasks have to be performed because it goes between short-term storage and long-term storage. So we're kind of keeping things ticking over, if you will. During last year, when we had the first lockdown, everything stopped until the midsummer. And then there were indications that we could try and get back to some sort of normality. So the business had to be very flexible when it came to looking at destinations they could fly to. So one day, you might have booked a holiday to Spain, and then the policy of the Spanish government might have changed, or the UK government had a list, or still have a list of where's safe and where's not. So the company would ring the customers who are due to fly out to Spain and say, well, I'm sorry, we can't take you to Spain, but would you like to go to Greece instead? And it was very, very proactive. And my company got a lot of positive plaudits within the industry for being that quick to be able to respond to the changing situation. And that's one of the things that COVID, unfortunately, is having to do, is to focus people's mind on, it is to be able to improve flexibility, and a business has to say, right, well, we can't do this, we're going to have to do that. Take, for example, airlines that have stripped the seats out of the aircraft and are operating them as freighters. modified freighters for things like PPE flying. That's something that they would never normally have to think about doing. But if it's bringing in some money, it's bringing in some money, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that something that your company's thinking of doing?
I think the decisions that have been made by the company that I work for is very much to just leave things, because it's very difficult to predict when the markets will open again and in what capacity. They talk about vaccination passports. It's still quite a grey area. There's a short-term pain, but for long-term gain for my business, because it's a leisure business. So we're not reliant on business travel. I mean, look at what we're doing now. We're doing a lot of stuff on video conference. I think when we return to normal flying, a lot of scheduled airlines which rely on business travel, those businesses might have taken a cold, hard look at their expensive and decided that, well, actually, we don't need to fly to Milan, to Paris, to America to sign some papers. We'll do it digitally, or we'll do it through Zoom or Teams or whatever web conference suite you want to use. So there is going to be a more long-term hit for some airlines in that sense. But at the same time, my airline, Thompson, other charter airlines like that, they will recover quite rapidly, because ultimately people want holidays.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to come a point when the market is going to open up again, and people are just going to say, "Oh, sod this! I want a holiday."
Yeah,
and that's when people are going to start booking in their droves, shall we say?
Yeah, and it's not so much a problem with going to these places. It's more the administrative faff in the background. Do I have to isolate? Do I have to produce these certificates? I mean, if a PCR COVID test costs £100, for me on my own, that's kind of that's more palatable. But maybe for a family of 4 or 5, you're looking at quite a significant expense on the holiday. The holiday itself might cost them £300 a person, whereas then the testing and the isolation, the loss of funds, the loss of earnings, it makes it unviable. So that's why my company have kind of taken quite a cautious approach to these sort of things, because if they jump straight in, they might find they're flying airplanes around empty, which is going to lose them even more money.
Yeah, that's always the big problem. And that's something that we're seeing a lot in France. I mean, France at the moment is not as locked down as the UK is. I mean, we supposedly have a 6 o'clock curfew every evening. But you can get out of that just by signing a piece of paper to say that you're going somewhere for work. But in practice, there are still flights operating, and the domestic route network, albeit reduced, is still operating to a certain extent. But what we are seeing are a lot of last-minute cancellations when the companies are looking at the loads and the load factor and just saying, well, you know, it's going to cost us more money to operate the flight. So when you book a flight in France to go anywhere within France at the moment, it's a bit of a Russian roulette as to whether the flight will actually be operated. So
sorry, I was going to say, my airline don't operate domestically, but I had colleagues at British Airways and EasyJet who have similar thing. A lot of flights. I mean, British Airways, you would normally have, it's either 9 or 11 flights to Manchester from London every day, and that's gone down to 2 or 3 because they're all being combined. So my airline did the same when we were bringing people back last year. We were, say, we'd fly to Madeira, rather than flying an airplane from Leeds, Birmingham, Stansted, everywhere. They'd fly one airplane and people would come back into Leeds or Manchester, and then they'd be taxied to their destination because that was cheaper.
So moving swiftly on, since obviously the COVID situation and the whole furlough system, etc., I've seen a lot of pilots, yourself included, getting involved in delivery driving. Is that a conscious choice because it's a job where the skills are transferable, or is it just because of the flexibility that it gives?
I mean, at the moment, I'm on furlough with my employer, so and they top up my pay to a level. So I'm very lucky that I'm still sort of quite fiscally sound. So I'm certainly not doing it for the money, but it. For me, I mean, we're coming up for near enough a year that we've been under some restrictions now. It's nice because I live on my own. It's nice to get out of the house and to do something. I'm very lucky that I still have my job, but there are a number of pilots who have been made redundant from airlines. My business has made relatively small number, but they still have made redundancies. And it's a case of taking whatever work you can find. Now, for me, delivering the way because I'm employed through an agency, is very flexible. So if the business that I work for, normally my airline, decided to start flying tomorrow, I have the flexibility to be able to basically press pause on things and then go back to flying aircraft. But with some people, the industry is very fickle, and it at times can be a cruel mistress. So people are just having to do whatever they have to do to make ends meet.
Yeah. So the $1 million question: if I'm an 18-year-old guy now and I'm looking at a future career in the airline industry, if I want to go and start doing my commercial flight training tomorrow, would your advice to me be go for it, or would your advice to me be don't even think about it, go and do something else?
I definitely wouldn't say that it's a bad idea. When I was thinking about the decisions that I was going to be making about my training, I mean, the best piece of advice I was given was go out and get yourself a Class 1 medical, because you don't want to go and invest in a lot of training and then find that you might have a problem, say, with color blindness, something that you wouldn't normally pick up on your day-to-day things. But the industry will rebound. There will always be a demand for pilots. It's always good to have two skills. So as I was saying before with delivery driving, if you want to go and be a pilot, have something else you can fall back on if during the time you finish training to looking for your first job, you find yourself out of work, because you'll be having to pay your bills, you'll be having to pay your debt repayments, what have you. If you have an industry that you can continue to work in until that job you want comes around, then that would be a good piece of advice. But if it's something you want to do, think about how the industry is when you come to starting your training. I mean, I would say now, as in now, is not the best time. Let's give it 6 months and wait and see what happens with the pandemic and the restrictions. But airlines and aviation specifically tends to react quite quickly to market changes. If suddenly you find that a lot more people want to go on holidays, then there will be a lot of recruitment, and there will be an adjustment very, very quickly. Forgive me, I don't know that many French charter airlines, but you must have the same ones that we have in the UK. And
there are a few charter operators in France, not necessarily the same ones, but there are companies that operate charters.
So
ASL is one.
Corsair?
And Corsair, that they operate. They operate a lot of scheduled routes, but they do operate a lot of holiday charters as well. And companies like Air Caraïbes and French Bee and companies like that, sort of based in the.
People find that they will need to put capacity in quite quickly, so flexibility is always the key. But go out and do your PPL. I mean, I did some hour building in France. I flew from Manchester all the way down to Barcelona, and I flew through France. And France was wonderful to fly in. Lots and lots of airspace, lots and lots of nice scenery. So go and do your PPL at a start. And I mean, you obviously offer an awful lot of language training. Go out and get your aviation language qualification, because anyone who's bilingual